Okay, well, let's go ahead and develop the script for the bird. So I'm going to go ahead and select bird, and then I'll scroll down over here to add component. And specifically, we're going to create a new script, and we'll just simply call that bird. This will be our bird script rather. C# is good. We're going to create this. And by the way, I should have made sure to move my scripts all into the script folder. So let me go ahead and create a new folder called scripts. And then I can take that bird script and move it into the scripts folder. All the scripts that we're going to write, we're going to place into this scripts folder. And now I'm ready to double click on bird. So that's going to take me to MonoDevelop. And then we can start to generate our code. Well, the first thing that I'm thinking of is that we're going to have to apply an upward force to the bird every time the user clicks the mouse. So let's go ahead and create a public variable. It's going to be of type float, and we'll call this up force. And let's initially set this to 200. Later on, you can change this because maybe you want to give more or less force. Let's just start off with the 200. That's what the Unity developers did. We'll start off with that. Let's go ahead and create a private instance variable. So this will be of type Boolean. And we're going to just ask if the Flappy Bird is dead. Initially, the Flappy Bird is not going to be dead, so we'll set it to false. And this is going to be the parameter that tells us if whether or not we need to stop the game and therefore prevent any additional mouse clicking, because once the bird is dead, that's it. Okay, next you're going to type private rigid body 2D, and we'll give it the abbreviation rigid body 2 dimensions. All right, so what's going to happen is, well, first of all, this bird script is associated with the bird, right? So if I select bird, scroll down over here to the bottom, this script, bird, is associated with this bird that I have on the screen. All right, so we've already established a rigid body for that bird, right? If I select the bird, did I scroll up here? Yes, yeah, we've associated a rigid body with that, but programmatically, I want to refer to that rigid body. So what this RD or RB2D represents, is going to represent, is the connection, the rigid body 2D connection to this rigid body 2D item or object. And so the way that we're going to do that is inside of start, we'll say RB2D get component, and we'll put the angle bracket rigid body 2D, close the angle bracket, open and close parentheses. Start, as you know, at the very beginning of the program, just once, it's going to read all the content. What we're saying is, hey, if there is a rigid body component associated with this bird script, which of course is associated with this bird, if there is a rigid body component, let's get that, and internally, programmatically, we're going to refer to that as RB2D. So in essence, it just gets this guy, the rigid body 2D component that is a part of this bird. Okay, so now let's go over here to the update. Let's determine if this thing is dead, because if it is dead, then we need to stop it from moving. So we'll say if is dead, which is our variable that we created over here. If this thing is false, so open and close curly braces. I was thinking about if dead is true. No, if is dead is false. In other words, we're alive, and so we're able to do stuff such as click the mouse button and let's have this thing flap. So what we'll do is we'll say within another if statement, input dot get mouse button down, specifically the left mouse button. Open and close curly braces. Okay, so what this mechanism does is if it is detected that the user has clicked the left mouse button, that's what the 0 represents in this case, the left mouse button. And if we've clicked it, if we've pressed it down, then what are we going to do? Well, first of all, let's apply some velocity to the Flappy Bird. So our rigid body 2D, the velocity, so dot velocity, we are going to set that to vector2 dot 0. And let me type in the next code and then we'll talk about this. We're going to add force, specifically a new vector2 item, and the x-axis is not going to have any force. The y-axis is going to have an up force. We'll close the parentheses 2 times, put a semicolon in there. Okay, so let's think about this. You know that update is called once every frame. Is dead equals false? We are asking if we are alive, because if we are alive and if the user clicks the left mouse button, so this is what we want to do. Any velocity that is applied to the rigid body, let's go ahead and set that to 0. So there is no velocity at this point. And then we are going to add a force. The amount of force is based on our up force float amount, which in this case we said is going to be 200F. F means floating point. Now, in the x-axis, there's no force. We don't want this thing moving forward or backward. We only want this thing to move up or down. We only want it to move up or down by a little amount. So by setting the velocity to 0, so in other words, there is no velocity once we click the mouse button down, we cancel whatever velocity currently exists. We add a little bit of upward force. How are we doing that? Well, the dot add force property of a rigid body requires a vector 2D. So a vector can be a point on a 2D coordinate, but it can also represent a force, and in this case, a directional force. And in this case, we're saying no directional force in the x-axis, but yes, we will have directional force in the y-axis. So let me go ahead and save this. So I'll say File, Save. All right. So now I'm going to go back over here to Unity, and let's see what happens. So play. Okay, so I'm clicking the mouse. You can probably hear me clicking the mouse. Now it lands, and I can still click the mouse. And that's okay. You know, this is like step 1, so we can see what happens here. But the good thing is every time there's a click, right, we're going up. So let me just click, 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 click. Let it go down, click, click. So do you see what's happening over here with this velocity? Is 0D, so I'll click, 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 and so it's coming down really fast, and as soon as it click, do you see how I reset that to 0 and add a little tiny force upward? Okay, let's play around with this. Let's have some fun. What I'm going to do is, first of all, make sure that bird is selected, and you see here, well, actually, I had 200 over here. Yours will say 200 in terms of the bird script up force. Let me increase that now to 400. Press enter, and let's see what happens when we go into the game mode. Okay, so watch this. I'm going to click a little bit more force. Okay, let's see what happens now if I increase this to 1,000. And let's get into the game mode. Okay, I'm going to click. Ready? Holy moly, that's a lot of force, up force that's being applied to that guy. So this is what I mean by you'll have to play with this. If I make this too small, that's not going to be good either. So let's see what happens when I actually, you know what, I was in game mode, so I have to get out of the game mode, then I can go ahead and type whatever the value is, go back into game mode, and let's see what happens. So 50. Oh, it's terrible, right? I had to click this thing a ton of times. That's not good either. So as it ends up, 200 is probably a good value. If you want to increase that by a certain amount or decrease it by a certain amount, that's okay. I'll leave that up to you. We're just trying to make it so that there's a little bit of a pulse of an upward force every time that you click the mouse to keep the Flappy Bird up. Alright, so let me get out of game mode. Okay, as we've just seen from our gameplay, as soon as the Flappy Bird hits the ground, I can click a mouse and it's going to continue with a little bit of force in an upward direction, but I don't want that. I want it to stop once it hits the ground, or later on when we add the columns, I want it to stop flapping. Now the reason why we have a problem is because we haven't set the isDead property to true. So let me go ahead and go back into the script. Now I could just simply click over here and go to Edit Script, or with my Mac, I'm just going to hit Command Tab. You can probably hit Control Tab or Alt Tab, I should say, to switch over back to MonoDevelop. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a new function. So part of the Unity API has this one function called onCollision, enter, and then 2D. Make sure that the spelling is correct. Make sure the capitalization is correct as well. I've made plenty of mistakes with lowercase o and it won't work. Or one time I typed in onCollision event. That doesn't work. It's got to be onCollision, enter 2D. And what we're going to simply do in this function, when it detects that there is a collision with this bird, right, because this is the bird script, when there is a collision, we want to set the isDead variable to true. Okay, so now if it's true, when we go back to update, isDead is true equal to false? No, it will not enter inside of the if statement, and so it will not allow the clicking of the mouse to have any effect because this is false. So let me go ahead and save my work. Go back over here to Unity. Let's enter into the game mode, and I'm going to let it fall on purpose. Good. Now I'm going to click, and nothing happens. Okay, now let me get out of this game mode, get back into it, and get ready to click. So I'm going to start clicking right now before it falls down. All right, so everything is working fine, but once it touches the ground, it makes a collision. Now I click, nothing happens. So that's exactly the behavior that we want, that when there is in fact a collection, this is when it's going to be triggering this particular event, that we set the isDead property to false, to true rather. Therefore, this if statement is not going to be activated, and there is no effect of clicking when it comes to this mouse, or when it comes to the Flappy Bird, I should say. It's not going to, the mouse is not going to affect it.